The crystal chandelier cast dancing shadows across the marble floor of the Grand Meridian Hotel's ballroom as Sheikh Khalil Al-Mansouri collapsed during his keynote speech at the International Business Summit. The 58-year-old oil magnate, worth an estimated $2 billion, clutched his chest and gasped words in Arabic that none of the 300 distinguished guests could understand. His designer suit crumpled as he fell behind the podium, his face contorted in pain as he struggled to breathe. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The audience of CEOs, politicians, and celebrities sat frozen in their evening attire, their champagne glasses suspended mid-air as they watched one of the world's most powerful men fighting for his life. The Sheikh's desperate pleas in his native tongue echoed through the ballroom's sound system, but not a single person in the crowd moved to help. They stared in stunned silence, these titans of industry and masters of the universe, paralyzed by their own privilege and disconnected from basic human compassion. Then, from the back of the room, a figure in a gray maintenance uniform pushed through the crowd of designer gowns and $1,000 suits. Hassan Nazir, the hotel's night janitor, had been emptying wastebaskets when he heard the commotion. The 45-year-old Pakistani immigrant dropped his cleaning cart and rushed toward the stage, his worn work boots clicking against the polished floor as he ran. The Grand Meridian Hotel had been Hassan Nazir's workplace for 7 years, though most of the hotel's elite clientele had never noticed him. He arrived each night at 10 p.m., cleaned the offices, ballrooms, and conference rooms, and disappeared before the important people returned the next morning. To the wealthy guests who frequented the hotel's exclusive events, Hassan was invisible, just another brown face in work clothes whose purpose was to maintain their pristine environment without disrupting their important conversations about mergers, acquisitions, and market dominance. Sheikh Khalil Al-Mansouri had been staying in the hotel's presidential suite for 3 days, preparing for this evening's speech to the International Business Summit. The event was supposed to be his crowning achievement, a presentation about sustainable energy investments that would position his petroleum empire as forward-thinking and environmentally conscious. The irony wasn't lost on those who knew that his fortune was built on the very fossil fuels that were destroying the planet, but in the world of billionaire philanthropy, image mattered more than substance. The Sheikh's entourage had treated the hotel staff with the casual dismissiveness that came naturally to people who measured their worth in billions. His personal assistant, Amir Qasim, had berated Hassan 2 nights earlier for not replacing the towels in the suite's guest bathroom quickly enough. The Sheikh's security chief, a former military contractor named David Sterling, had physically blocked Hassan from entering the elevator when the Sheikh was present, claiming it was a security protocol. Even the hotel's management had instructed their housekeeping staff to avoid direct contact with the Sheikh's party, treating them like potential threats rather than the hard-working people who made their luxury possible. Hassan had grown accustomed to this treatment over the years. He had immigrated to the United States from Lahore 15 years ago with a degree in electrical engineering and dreams of building a better life for his wife Farah and their 3 children. But American employers didn't recognize his Pakistani credentials, and his accent made him unemployable in his chosen field. So he took whatever work he could find, eventually landing the night janitor position at the Grand Meridian, where he earned enough to support his family and send small amounts back to his elderly parents in Pakistan. The other hotel employees respected Hassan for his work ethic and kindness, but the wealthy guests saw only what their prejudices allowed them to see. To them, he was just another immigrant doing menial labor, invisible and interchangeable with any other person in a maintenance uniform. They never bothered to learn that he spoke 4 languages fluently, had designed electrical systems for major buildings in Lahore, or that he spent his free time tutoring refugee children in mathematics and science. On this particular evening, Hassan had been working in the hotel's administrative offices when he heard the Sheikh's speech beginning in the ballroom below. The presentation was being broadcast throughout the hotel's internal video system, allowing staff to monitor the event for security and service purposes. Hassan had paused in his cleaning to listen, partly because he was curious about what the famous oil magnate would say about sustainable energy, and partly because it was rare to hear Arabic spoken so eloquently in his workplace. Sheikh Al-Mansouri had been 30 minutes into his presentation when the medical emergency struck. He had been discussing his company's new solar energy initiatives, speaking in accented but clear English about the future of renewable resources in the Middle East. The audience was politely engaged, though many were more interested in the networking opportunities than the actual content of the speech. These were people who attended such events to be seen, to make connections, and to maintain their positions in the elite social hierarchy that governed international business. The Sheikh's collapse happened suddenly and without warning. One moment he was gesturing toward a PowerPoint slide showing wind farms in the Arabian Peninsula, and the next he was grabbing the podium for support as waves of chest pain overwhelmed him. His face went pale, then gray as he struggled to remain upright. When he began speaking in rapid Arabic, his voice filled with panic and pain. The audience initially thought it was part of his presentation, perhaps a cultural reference they didn't understand. أنا بحاجة إلى مساعدة. قلبي لا أستطيع أن أتنفس. The Sheikh gasped into the microphone, his words echoing through the ballroom's sophisticated sound system. The translation would have been simple for anyone who spoke Arabic. I need help. My heart. I can't breathe. But to the assembled crowd of American and European business leaders, it was just foreign sounds coming from a man who was clearly in distress. Dr. Margaret Chen, a renowned cardiologist who was attending the summit as a guest speaker, sat in the third row but remained frozen in her seat. She later claimed she hadn't immediately recognized the signs of a heart attack because she couldn't understand what the Sheikh was saying. Senator Robert Blackwood, who chaired the Foreign Relations Committee and had extensive experience in Middle Eastern affairs, actually did speak some Arabic but was too shocked to process what he was hearing. Even Ambassador Patricia Thornfield, who had served in 3 Arabic-speaking countries, seemed unable to bridge the gap between her diplomatic training and the immediate human crisis unfolding before her. The Sheikh's security team, trained professionals who were being paid handsomely to protect their client, stood paralyzed at the side of the stage. David Sterling, the head of security, later explained that he had been trained to protect against external threats, not medical emergencies, and that he wasn't qualified to provide medical assistance. The other security personnel seemed to be waiting for orders from Sterling, creating a chain of inaction that left the Sheikh without help when he needed it most. Amira Qasim, the Sheikh's personal assistant, was sitting in the front row but seemed more concerned about the impact on her employer's image than his immediate medical needs. She was frantically typing on her phone, presumably alerting the Sheikh's public relations team about the developing crisis, rather than calling for emergency medical assistance. Her first instinct was damage control, not life preservation, a priority that revealed the shallow values that governed her world. The hotel's management team, led by General Manager Richard Pemberton, was equally useless in the crisis. Pemberton, a man who prided himself on running one of the city's most exclusive hotels, stood at the back of the room calculating the potential liability and reputation damage, rather than focusing on saving a human life. His assistant managers clustered around him, whispering about insurance policies and legal exposure, while a man lay dying on their stage. Meanwhile, Hassan had heard the Sheikh's Arabic words through the hotel's communication system and immediately understood what was happening. Unlike the educated, wealthy, and supposedly sophisticated audience in the ballroom, Hassan recognized both the language and the medical emergency it described. His years of listening to Arabic news broadcasts, maintaining connections with Middle Eastern communities, and studying languages as a hobby had given him the cultural competency that the business elite lacked, despite their international dealings. Without hesitation, Hassan abandoned his cleaning cart and ran toward the ballroom. He pushed through the heavy double doors, past the paralyzed security guards, and made his way through the crowd of stunned onlookers. His gray maintenance uniform stood out starkly against the sea of expensive evening wear, marking him as an outsider who didn't belong in this rarefied atmosphere. Several guests actually tried to stop him, assuming that the hotel worker was somehow adding to the chaos rather than trying to help. "Sir, you can't go up there," called Margaret Fairfax, the wife of a pharmaceutical CEO, as she grabbed Hassan's arm. "Security will handle this." But Hassan gently pulled away from her grip and continued toward the stage, his focus entirely on the man who was crying out for help in a language he understood. When Hassan reached the Sheikh, he immediately knelt beside him and began speaking in fluent Arabic, his voice calm and reassuring despite the chaos surrounding them. "أنا هنا لمساعدتك. أنت بأمان الآن. سيكون كل شيء بخير," Hassan said softly, which translated to, "I'm here to help you. You're safe now. Everything will be okay." The effect on Sheikh Al-Mansouri was immediate and profound. His panicked expression softened as he heard his native language spoken with genuine care and competence. For the first time since his collapse, He wasn't alone with his fear and pain. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story. Someone understood him, not just linguistically but culturally, and was responding with the kind of human compassion that transcended social and economic boundaries. Hassan quickly assessed the Sheikh's condition using the first aid training he had received years earlier as part of his engineering job in Pakistan. The Sheikh's pulse was rapid and irregular, his skin was clammy, and his breathing was labored. These were classic signs of a heart attack, and Hassan knew that immediate action was crucial for the Sheikh's survival. هل تشعر بألم في صدرك؟ هل يمتد الألم إلى ذرائك؟ Hassan asked, inquiring about chest pain and whether it was radiating to the Sheikh's arm. When the Sheikh nodded weakly, Hassan immediately turned to the crowd and shouted in clear English, "Someone call 911. This man is having a heart attack. We need an ambulance now." The ballroom erupted in confused murmurs as the reality of the situation finally penetrated the audience's collective shock. But even with Hassan's clear English explanation of the emergency, many of the guests seemed more concerned about the disruption to their evening than the life-threatening medical crisis. Some actually complained about the interruption to the program, wondering when the networking reception would begin. Hassan ignored the crowd's self-absorbed chatter and focused entirely on keeping the Sheikh conscious and stable. He loosened the Sheikh's tie and collar to help him breathe more easily, elevated his legs to improve blood flow, and continued speaking to him in Arabic, providing the kind of cultural comfort that was completely absent from the surrounding chaos. لا تخاف سأبقى معك حتى وصول المسعفين, Hassan assured him, promising to stay with him until the paramedics arrived. He then began asking the Sheikh about his medical history in Arabic, gathering information that would be crucial for the emergency responders. Dr. Margaret Chen finally overcame her paralysis and approached the stage, but when she began examining the Sheikh, she immediately encountered a language barrier. She couldn't communicate with him about his symptoms, his pain level, or his medical history. Every question she asked in English was met with confused Arabic responses that she couldn't understand. It was Hassan who became the crucial translator, bridging the gap between the medical professional and the patient. He says the pain started in his chest and is now in his left arm and jaw, Hassan translated as Dr. Chen performed her examination. He has a history of high blood pressure and takes medication for it, but he forgot to take his pills this morning because of his travel schedule. He's also been under extreme stress from business negotiations. This information was vital for Dr. Chen's assessment and treatment recommendations, but it would have been completely unavailable without Hassan's linguistic abilities and cultural sensitivity. The irony was stark. The most educated and wealthy people in the room were helpless to provide basic assistance to the Sheikh, while the immigrant janitor they had ignored and dismissed was the only person capable of saving his life. As they waited for the ambulance, Hassan continued to comfort the Sheikh in Arabic while coordinating with Dr. Chen to monitor his vital signs. The Sheikh's condition stabilized somewhat under their combined care, but he remained conscious largely because Hassan's presence gave him someone to communicate with during the most frightening experience of his life. The paramedics arrived 12 minutes after Hassan's initial call for help, a response time that was considered excellent for the city's emergency services. But even the highly trained EMT team faced immediate communication challenges when they tried to assess the Sheikh's condition. Once again, Hassan became the essential intermediary, translating medical questions and responses between the paramedics and their patient. "Tell him we're going to give him aspirin and nitroglycerin for his heart," EMT Captain Rodriguez instructed Hassan. "Ask him if he's allergic to any medications and when he last ate." Hassan smoothly translated these crucial questions, ensuring that the Sheikh received proper medical care without dangerous complications from drug allergies or interactions. During the ambulance ride to Mercy General Hospital, Hassan rode along at the Sheikh's request, continuing to provide translation services and emotional support. The Sheikh, despite his pain and fear, expressed amazement that a hotel janitor spoke such fluent Arabic and seemed to understand his cultural background so well. Hassan explained that he had worked with Arabic-speaking engineers in Pakistan and had studied the language because of his respect for Middle Eastern culture and his desire to communicate with people from all backgrounds. "You are more than what you appear to be," the Sheikh whispered in Arabic as the ambulance raced through the city streets. "These wealthy people at the hotel, They have everything but understand nothing. You understand everything, but have been given nothing. Hassan simply nodded and squeezed the sheikh's hand, focusing on keeping him calm and stable rather than engaging in philosophical discussions about social inequality. But the sheikh's words highlighted the profound irony of the evening's events. The person with the least social status and economic power had been the only one capable of providing the most important service when it truly mattered. At the hospital, Hassan continued to serve as translator during the sheikh's initial evaluation and treatment. The emergency room staff was grateful for his assistance, as they frequently encountered language barriers that complicated medical care for international patients. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the attending cardiologist, later commented that Hassan's translation skills may have been the difference between successful treatment and a tragic outcome. The sheikh was diagnosed with a moderate heart attack, caused by a combination of stress, hypertension, and a blocked coronary artery. He required immediate cardiac catheterization to restore blood flow to his heart muscle, a procedure that was successful largely because of the quick response and accurate medical information that Hassan had facilitated. While the sheikh was in surgery, Hassan sat in the hospital waiting room, still wearing his gray maintenance uniform, surrounded by the sheikh's entourage and business associates who had finally arrived from the hotel. For the first time all evening, these wealthy and powerful people were forced to acknowledge Hassan's crucial role in saving their colleague's life. But their acknowledgement was grudging and tinged with the kind of cognitive dissonance that comes from having one's worldview challenged by inconvenient facts. Amira Qassem, the sheikh's personal assistant, actually seemed resentful that Hassan had been present during her employer's moment of vulnerability. She made several pointed comments about security protocols and the appropriateness of hotel staff being involved in private medical situations. Her priority remained image management rather than gratitude for the man who had potentially saved her boss's life. David Sterling, the security chief, was even more hostile toward Hassan, seeing his heroic actions as evidence of his own professional failure. Rather than expressing appreciation, Sterling questioned Hassan about his background and motivations, treating him like a potential threat rather than a lifesaver. His interrogation revealed the paranoid mindset that often accompanies extreme wealth, and the assumption that kindness from working-class people must have ulterior motives. The other business leaders who had attended the summit maintained their social distance from Hassan, treating him with polite acknowledgement but no genuine warmth or respect. They seemed uncomfortable with the idea that someone they considered beneath their social status had demonstrated superior competence and moral courage in a crisis. Their discomfort spoke volumes about the class-based prejudices that governed their thinking and behavior. Dr. Martinez emerged from the surgical suite at 2:30 a.m. with good news about the sheikh's condition. The cardiac catheterization had been successful, the blocked artery had been opened with a stent, and the sheikh's prognosis was excellent for a full recovery. She specifically praised Hassan's quick thinking and translation skills, noting that his cultural competency had been crucial for providing effective emergency care. Mr. Nazir, Dr. Martinez told Hassan, "Your ability to communicate with the patient in his native language and translate his medical history probably saved his life. In cardiac emergencies, every minute matters, and you eliminated the communication barriers that could have delayed proper treatment." When Sheikh Al-Mansouri was moved to the cardiac care unit, his first request was to see Hassan. The oil magnate, connected to monitoring equipment and still recovering from his procedure, grasped Hassan's hand and spoke to him in Arabic with tears in his eyes. "You didn't just save my life tonight," the sheikh said. "You reminded me what it means to be human. All these years I've been surrounded by people who want something from me, who see only my wealth and power. But you saw a man in pain and helped him without thinking about reward or recognition. That is the kind of person I thought I was, but I realize now that I had forgotten." Hassan was moved by the sheikh's words, but remained humble about his actions. "Anyone would have done the same thing if they had understood what you were saying," he replied in Arabic. "I just happened to be the only person there who spoke your language." But both men knew that wasn't entirely true. Hassan had been the only person present who combined linguistic ability with genuine human compassion and the moral courage to act when others remained paralyzed by social conventions and self-interest. His heroism wasn't just about speaking Arabic. It was about seeing past surface differences to recognize shared humanity and respond with immediate, selfless action. As the night wore on, word of Hassan's heroic actions began to spread through the hospital and back to the hotel. The story took on a life of its own as people learned about the immigrant janitor who had saved a billionaire's life, while 300 of the world's most powerful people stood by and watched. Social media began picking up the story, with early posts focusing on the dramatic rescue and the language barrier that had left everyone but Hassan unable to help. The hotel's management, led by General Manager Richard Pemberton, suddenly found themselves in an uncomfortable position. Their employee had become an unexpected hero, but his heroism highlighted their own failures and the failures of their elite clientele. Pemberton arrived at the hospital not to check on Hassan's well-being or express gratitude for his actions, but to discuss the situation and its potential impact on the hotel's reputation. "Hassan," Pemberton said in the hospital corridor, his voice cold and calculating, "we need to discuss how this incident will be handled from a public relations standpoint. The hotel's image and our relationship with high-profile clients could be affected by how this story is told." Hassan stared at his boss in disbelief. He had just spent the night saving a man's life, translating crucial medical information, and providing emotional support during a terrifying medical emergency. And Pemberton's primary concern was protecting the hotel's reputation among wealthy guests who had demonstrated their own moral bankruptcy by failing to help a dying man. "Mr. Pemberton," Hassan replied quietly, "I didn't think about the hotel's reputation when I saw someone who needed help. I just did what anyone should do." But even as he spoke, Hassan realized that his simple statement highlighted the vast gulf between his values and those of the people who employed him and the guests they served. The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of several reporters who had gotten wind of the story and were seeking interviews with the hero janitor. Pemberton immediately tried to control the situation, insisting that all media inquiries be directed through the hotel's public relations department. His instinct was to manage the narrative rather than allow Hassan to speak freely about what had happened. But the story was already beyond Pemberton's control. Hospital staff had witnessed Hassan's crucial role in saving the Sheikh's life, and several had already spoken to reporters about the immigrant janitor who had stepped up when wealthy and educated people had failed to act. The contrast between Hassan's heroism and the audience's inaction was too dramatic and symbolically powerful to be suppressed by corporate damage control. As dawn broke over the city, Hassan finally returned home to his modest apartment, where his wife Farah and their 3 children were waiting anxiously. They had heard about the incident at the hotel and were worried about Hassan's safety and job security. In their experience, immigrant workers who attracted attention, even positive attention, often faced negative consequences from employers who preferred their staff to remain invisible. Farah embraced her husband, tears in her eyes as she realized how close they had come to losing him, to the kind of retaliation that often befell people like them who stepped outside their prescribed social roles. "Are you in trouble?" she asked in Urdu, their shared language that provided comfort and privacy in their home. "I don't know," Hassan answered honestly. "I just did what felt right, but I'm not sure the hotel or the Sheikh's people see it that way." He was already beginning to understand that his heroic actions had disrupted the carefully maintained social order that kept people like him in their designated places, and that there might be consequences for his moral courage. Their eldest child, 16-year-old Amara, had been following the story on social media and showed her parents the posts that were already going viral. Videos from the hotel's security cameras had somehow been leaked, showing Hassan pushing through the crowd of paralyzed wealthy people to reach the Sheikh. The visual contrast was striking, a working-class immigrant in a maintenance uniform providing aid while hundreds of people in expensive formal wear stood frozen in their privilege. "Papa, you're famous," 12-year-old Omar said with pride and worry in his voice. "But what if the rich people get angry at you for making them look bad?" Even the children understood the potential dangers of challenging the social hierarchy. Having grown up in a family that survived by remaining invisible and avoiding conflict with people who had more power and resources, Hassan hugged his children and tried to reassure them, but privately he was beginning to realize that his simple act of human decency had set in motion a series of events that would challenge everything about his quiet, invisible existence. He had saved a man's life, but in doing so, he had also exposed the moral emptiness of the social elite and created a story that threatened their carefully constructed image of superiority and competence. The Sheikh's recovery progressed rapidly over the next few days, and he insisted on meeting with Hassan regularly during his hospital stay. These conversations, conducted in Arabic away from the prying ears of his business associates, revealed the depth of the Sheikh's gratitude and his growing understanding of the social dynamics that had led to Hassan being his only source of help during the medical emergency. "Hassan," the Sheikh said during one of their private conversations, "I have been thinking about what happened that night. I employ thousands of people around the world, and I thought I understood what it meant to value human resources. But I realize now that I have been surrounded by people who see others only in terms of their utility to power and wealth. You are the first person in years who has treated me simply as a human being in need of help." Hassan listened respectfully but remained modest about his actions. "Your Excellency, I was just doing what my parents taught me, what my faith teaches me. When someone needs help, you help them if you can. It doesn't matter who they are or where they come from." The Sheikh's eyes filled with tears as he contemplated the simple wisdom of Hassan's words. Here was a man who cleaned bathrooms and emptied trash cans, yet he possessed a moral clarity and humanitarian instinct that had been absent from every wealthy, educated person in that ballroom. The irony was both humbling and transformative for a man who had spent decades accumulating wealth and power, while losing touch with the basic human values that Hassan had never forgotten. As news of the rescue spread through international media, the story began to take on symbolic significance that extended far beyond the medical emergency itself. Commentary pieces appeared analyzing the incident as a metaphor for social inequality, cultural understanding, and the moral failures of extreme wealth. Hassan became an unwitting symbol of immigrant contributions to American society, while the paralyzed audience of business leaders represented the disconnection and moral bankruptcy of the elite class. The Sheikh's business associates and public relations team were increasingly concerned about the narrative that was developing around the incident. The story was being framed in ways that were unflattering to wealthy people in general and to the Sheikh's social circle in particular. They pressured him to distance himself from Hassan and to control the media coverage in ways that would minimize the class-based implications of what had happened. But Sheikh Al-Mansouri found himself changed by his brush with death and by his interactions with Hassan. For the first time in decades, he was questioning the values and priorities that had governed his life. He began to see his vast wealth and power, not as measures of his worth, but as barriers that had separated him from genuine human connection and moral authenticity. The transformation was evident to everyone around him, but it made his business associates and family members deeply uncomfortable. They had built their identities and financial security around the Sheikh's ruthless pursuit of profit and power. His new interest in social justice and human dignity threatened the foundation of their comfortable existence. Meanwhile, Hassan was discovering that heroism came with unexpected complications. Media requests poured in from around the world, with reporters wanting to interview the immigrant janitor who had saved a billionaire's life. His employer pressured him to decline these interviews, fearing that the attention would disrupt the hotel's carefully managed image and relationship with wealthy clients. The story had touched a nerve in American society, highlighting issues of immigration, class inequality, and cultural competency that made many people uncomfortable. Hassan had become a symbol of values that challenged the dominant narrative about success, worth, and social hierarchy. His simple act of human decency had exposed the moral failures of people who were supposed to be leaders and role models. As the first part of this incredible story reaches its conclusion, Hassan Nazir found himself at the center of a cultural controversy that he had never sought or wanted. His only goal had been to help a fellow human being in distress, but that simple act of compassion had revealed uncomfortable truths about American society and the people who controlled its wealth and power. The Sheikh's recovery was complete, but the social and cultural implications of what had happened that night were just beginning to unfold. Hassan had proven that true heroism often comes from unexpected sources, and that moral courage is not determined by wealth, education, or social status. His actions had silenced a room full of powerful people, not through words, but through the kind of authentic human response that had been absent from their privileged existence. The second part of this story would bring even more dramatic changes, as the consequences of Hassan's heroism rippled outward to challenge established power structures and force a reckoning with values that money could not buy. But that transformation was still to come, building on the foundation of one man's simple refusal to let another human being suffer alone, regardless of the social barriers that were supposed to keep them apart. The transformation began 3 weeks after the incident when Judge Elena Ramirez received an unexpected phone call from the State Department. The federal government had launched a quiet investigation into the business summit incident after several foreign dignitaries expressed concern about the treatment of international guests and the apparent cultural insensitivity displayed by American business leaders. The optics were particularly damaging given the current administration's efforts to strengthen Middle Eastern trade relationships. Judge Ramirez, who specialized in employment law and civil rights cases, had been asked to review potential violations of workplace discrimination statutes and public accommodation laws. What she discovered during her preliminary investigation shocked even her seasoned legal perspective. The Grand Meridian Hotel had a documented pattern of segregating its immigrant workers from high-profile guests, implementing policies that effectively created a two-tiered system based on national origin and economic status. Hassan's personnel file revealed a disturbing pattern of systematic undervaluation. Despite his engineering degree and multilingual abilities, he had been consistently passed over for promotions and confined to night shift work that minimized his contact with the hotel's wealthy clientele. His supervisor evaluations were consistently excellent, yet his wages had remained stagnant for 7 years, while less qualified employees with American backgrounds had been promoted to management positions. The investigation expanded when Dr. Sarah Martinez, the cardiologist who had treated Sheikh Al-Mansouri, filed a formal complaint with the state medical board regarding the dangerous communication barriers that had nearly cost a patient his life. Her report detailed how the assembled medical professionals at the summit had been unable to provide basic emergency care due to cultural and linguistic incompetence, creating a public health hazard that could have had fatal consequences. Meanwhile, Sheikh Al-Mansouri was undergoing his own profound transformation during his extended recovery period. Against the advice of his business associates and family members, he had begun conducting his own investigation into Hassan's background and circumstances. What he discovered filled him with a mixture of admiration and shame that would reshape his understanding of justice and human dignity. Through private investigators and cultural liaisons, the Sheikh learned that Hassan had been one of Pakistan's most promising young engineers before immigrating to America. His designs for sustainable electrical systems had been implemented in major construction projects throughout South Asia, earning him recognition from professional organizations and academic institutions. Yet none of this expertise had been valued or even acknowledged during his years of employment at the Grand Meridian Hotel. The Sheikh also discovered that Hassan sent 60% of his modest salary to support his elderly parents in Lahore and to fund a small school in his home village that provided education for refugee children. Despite earning barely above minimum wage, Hassan had managed to sponsor the immigration of 3 other Pakistani families, helping them navigate the complex legal and cultural challenges of starting new lives in America. This man has accomplished more meaningful work on a janitor's salary than I have with all my billions, the Sheikh confided to his personal physician during one of their sessions. He has been building bridges between cultures and supporting communities, while I have been accumulating wealth and surrounding myself with people who tell me what I want to hear. The Sheikh's transformation became evident to his business empire when he began making unprecedented changes to his corporate policies and personal priorities. He established a new foundation focused on immigrant rights and cultural exchange programs, with an initial funding commitment of $500 million. He also announced that his petroleum company would be transitioning to renewable energy faster than any competitor, driven by his newfound understanding of moral responsibility and social justice. These changes sent shockwaves through the Sheikh's business network and family connections. His eldest son, Rashid Al-Mansouri, who had been groomed to inherit the petroleum empire, was particularly disturbed by his father's new direction. Rashid had built his identity around maintaining the family's wealth and power, and he saw his father's humanitarian awakening as a threat to their economic dominance. "Father, you're destroying everything our family has built," Rashid argued during a heated confrontation at the hospital. "This janitor saved your life, and we're grateful for that. But you can't restructure our entire business philosophy based on one emotional incident. Our shareholders and business partners expect stability and profit maximization, not social experiments." But Sheikh Al-Mansouri was no longer the same man who had collapsed on that hotel stage. His brush with death and his subsequent interactions with Hassan had awakened a moral consciousness that had been dormant for decades. he began to see his vast wealth not as an achievement to be preserved, but as a responsibility to be used for the betterment of humanity. The Sheikh's business associates grew increasingly concerned as he continued to deviate from conventional corporate behavior. David Sterling, his security chief, was particularly worried about the security implications of the Sheikh's new public profile and his association with Hassan. Sterling had built his career on maintaining the invisible barriers that protected wealthy clients from the general population, and he saw Hassan's heroism as a dangerous precedent that could encourage other working-class people to approach his clients inappropriately. "Sir, we need to establish clearer boundaries," Sterling advised during a security briefing. "This incident has created unrealistic expectations about accessibility and has potentially compromised our ability to maintain proper protective protocols. I recommend limiting your contact with Mr. Nazir and implementing stricter separation procedures for future events." The Sheikh's response revealed the depth of his transformation. "Mr. Sterling, the only thing that was compromised that night was my understanding of what really matters in life. Hassan Nazir showed more courage and competence in 10 minutes than my entire security team demonstrated in 10 years. If our protocols prevent genuine human connection and mutual aid, then our protocols are the problem, not the solution." Meanwhile, Hassan was struggling with the unexpected attention and scrutiny that had followed his heroic actions. Media requests continued to pour in from around the world, with journalists wanting to interview the immigrant janitor who had exposed the moral failures of America's business elite. His story had become a symbol of the disconnect between wealth and wisdom, between education and understanding, between privilege and compassion. The Grand Meridian Hotel's management was facing increasing pressure to address the systemic discrimination that Hassan's case had brought to light. General Manager Richard Pemberton found himself defending employment practices that had seemed normal and appropriate just weeks earlier but now appeared obviously prejudiced and legally questionable under public scrutiny. The hotel has always maintained the highest standards of professionalism and equal opportunity employment, Pemberton stated during a press conference that had been hastily arranged to address the growing controversy. "Mr. Nazir is a valued employee who has always been treated fairly and in accordance with all applicable labor laws and regulations. But employment records and witness testimonies told a different story." Former hotel employees came forward with accounts of systematic discrimination against immigrant workers, describing policies that effectively segregated staff based on national origin and confined foreign-born employees to positions that minimized their contact with wealthy guests. The pattern was so consistent and pervasive that it could not be dismissed as coincidental or unintentional. Hassan's union representative, Maria Gonzalez, had been quietly building a case against the hotel's discriminatory practices for several years. The publicity surrounding Hassan's heroism finally gave her the platform and evidence she needed to challenge the systemic inequities that had affected dozens of immigrant workers at the Grand Meridian and similar establishments throughout the city. "Hassan Nazir's case is not unique," Gonzalez explained during a community meeting in the Hotel Workers Union Hall. "We have documented patterns of wage theft, promotion discrimination, and hostile work environments that specifically target employees based on their national origin, accent, and immigration status. The only reason Hassan's situation has received attention is because his heroism was too dramatic in public to be ignored or suppressed." The union's investigation revealed that the Grand Meridian had been systematically undervaluing immigrant employees for years, paying them below market rates while extracting maximum productivity through fear of termination and deportation threats. Hassan's case was particularly egregious because his qualifications and abilities far exceeded the requirements of his position, yet he had been deliberately kept in low-status work to maintain the hotel's segregated labor hierarchy. Judge Ramirez's official investigation concluded that the Grand Meridian Hotel had violated multiple federal and state employment laws, creating a hostile work environment based on national origin discrimination and implementing policies that constituted systematic wage theft and opportunity denial. Her report recommended criminal charges against hotel management and civil penalties that could exceed $10 million. The legal consequences were swift and comprehensive. The Department of Labor launched a formal investigation into the hotel's employment practices, while the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission filed discrimination charges on behalf of Hassan and 43 other current and former immigrant employees. The State Attorney General's office announced a criminal investigation into potential fraud and tax evasion related to the hotel's underreporting of immigrant worker wages and benefits. Sheikh Al-Mansouri, following his moral awakening, decided to take unprecedented action to support Hassan and address the systemic injustices that his case had revealed. Against the strong objections of his business advisors and family members, the Sheikh announced that he would be funding a comprehensive legal defense fund for immigrant workers facing discrimination, with Hassan's case serving as the flagship example of the program. Hassan Nazir saved my life when no one else would act, the Sheikh declared during a press conference at his company's headquarters. Now I intend to use my resources to save the lives and dignity of people like Hassan, who have been systematically devalued and discriminated against by institutions that should recognize their contributions and respect their humanity. The Sheikh's announcement sent shockwaves through the business community and his own corporate empire. Several major business partners threatened to end their relationships with his companies, claiming that his new social justice focus was inconsistent with their corporate values and profit objectives. His family members held emergency meetings to discuss possible legal action to prevent him from destroying the family's wealth through what they characterized as misguided philanthropy. But the Sheikh remained determined to honor the moral awakening that Hassan's heroism had triggered. He established the Nazir Foundation for Immigrant Rights, named after Hassan despite the janitor's humble protests about the honor. The foundation's initial budget of $500 million was dedicated to providing legal representation, job training, and educational opportunities for immigrant workers who had been victims of discrimination and exploitation. The foundation's first major action was to hire Hassan as its Director of Cultural Competency and Community Outreach, offering him a salary of $150,000 annually, plus full benefits and educational support for his children. The position would utilize Hassan's engineering background, linguistic abilities, and cultural knowledge to design programs that would help immigrant workers access opportunities that matched their qualifications and potential. Hassan's acceptance of the position marked a dramatic transformation in his life circumstances, but it also created new challenges and responsibilities that he had never anticipated. Moving from invisible night janitor to public advocate and foundation director required him to navigate social and professional environments that had previously been closed to people of his background and economic status. The Sheikh insisted that Hassan's first priority should be his own family's welfare and educational advancement. He arranged for Hassan's wife Farah to receive recognition for her Pakistani nursing credentials, enabling her to work in American hospitals at her proper professional level. He also established full college scholarships for Hassan's 3 children, ensuring that their educational opportunities would not be limited by their family's previous economic circumstances. Hassan, you have given me a second chance at life and a first chance at genuine moral purpose, the Sheikh explained during their first official meeting at the foundation's new headquarters. I want to ensure that your family receives the opportunities and recognition that were denied to you, and that your story inspires systematic changes that will benefit thousands of other families facing similar challenges. The transformation extended beyond individual cases to broader policy changes and institutional reforms. The Sheikh used his business connections and political influence to advocate for federal legislation that would strengthen protections for immigrant workers and establish criminal penalties for systematic wage theft and discrimination. His lobbying efforts were particularly effective because of his status as a wealthy foreign investor whose own experience had demonstrated the costs of cultural incompetence and prejudice. The Grand Meridian Hotel, facing criminal charges and civil penalties, was forced to implement comprehensive reforms to its employment practices and corporate culture. General Manager Richard Pemberton was terminated, along with several other managers who had been involved in implementing discriminatory policies. The hotel was required to pay $15 million in back wages and penalties to affected employees, with Hassan receiving the largest individual settlement. More importantly, the hotel was placed under federal monitoring for 5 years, with court-appointed observers ensuring that its employment practices complied with anti-discrimination laws and provided equal opportunity for advancement regardless of national origin or immigration status. The case became a landmark precedent for employment rights enforcement, demonstrating that systematic discrimination against immigrant workers would face serious legal consequences. The broader impact of Hassan's story extended throughout the hospitality industry and beyond, as other employers realized that their own discriminatory practices might face similar scrutiny and penalties. Union organizers reported increased membership among immigrant workers who had been inspired by Hassan's example to demand fair treatment and equal opportunities in their own workplaces. Dr. Sarah Martinez, the cardiologist who had treated Sheikh Al-Mansouri, used the incident as a catalyst for broader reforms in emergency medical care and cultural competency training. She established new protocols requiring hospitals to maintain multilingual staff and translation services for emergency situations, ensuring that language barriers would not compromise patient care in life-threatening situations. Hassan Nazir demonstrated that cultural competency and linguistic diversity are not luxury amenities but essential safety requirements, Dr. Martinez explained during a medical conference presentation about the case. His presence literally meant the difference between life and death for our patient, yet our medical system had no backup plan for communication with non-English speakers during emergencies. The medical reforms inspired by Hassan's heroism extended to training programs for emergency responders, hospital staff, and public safety personnel. The Sheikh's Foundation funded comprehensive cultural competency training for first responders throughout the region, ensuring that future medical emergencies would not be complicated by the kind of communication barriers that had nearly cost him his life. Meanwhile, the business community was grappling with the broader implications of the incident and the systematic changes it had triggered. The contrast between Hassan's heroism and the paralysis of the wealthy audience had become a powerful symbol of the moral failures that could accompany extreme wealth and privilege. Business schools began incorporating the case into their ethics curricula, using it to examine the responsibilities that come with economic power and social influence. Senator Robert Blackwood, who had been present during the Sheikh's medical emergency but had failed to act despite his Arabic language skills, found himself facing serious political consequences. His opponents in the upcoming election used the incident to question his leadership abilities and moral courage, arguing that his paralysis during a crisis reflected deeper character flaws that made him unfit for public office. The senator's attempts to minimize his role in the incident and shift attention to other aspects of his record only made the situation worse. Video footage from the hotel's security cameras clearly showed him standing frozen while Hassan pushed past him to reach the sheikh, creating a visual metaphor for the difference between authentic leadership and political posturing that resonated with voters across party lines. Ambassador Patricia Thornfield, whose diplomatic career had been built on Middle Eastern expertise, also faced professional consequences for her failure to assist during the Sheikh's medical emergency. The State Department quietly reassigned her to a less prestigious position, recognizing that her inability to bridge cultural and linguistic barriers during a crisis had damaged America's reputation with an important foreign ally. The broader diplomatic implications of the incident were significant, as foreign governments began questioning America's commitment to cultural competency and inclusive leadership. The Sheikh's public praise for Hassan's heroism, contrasted with his criticism of American business and political leaders, created diplomatic challenges that required high-level intervention to address. Sheikh Al-Mansouri used his platform and influence to advocate for broader changes in how wealthy individuals and corporations approached their social responsibilities. He began giving speeches at business conferences and academic institutions, sharing his personal transformation and challenging other wealthy people to examine their own values and priorities. I was surrounded by people who shared my wealth and status, but when I needed help, the only person who responded was someone I had never noticed or acknowledged, the sheikh explained during a keynote speech at Harvard Business School. Hassan Nazir taught me that true worth is not measured by bank accounts or stock portfolios, but by the willingness to act with courage and compassion when others are in need. The sheikh's speeches and writings about his experience became influential in business ethics discussions and corporate social responsibility programs. His transformation from profit-focused oil magnate to social justice advocate demonstrated that personal change was possible even for people who had spent decades prioritizing wealth accumulation over humanitarian concerns. Hassan's new role as foundation director allowed him to channel his engineering skills and cultural knowledge into systematic solutions for immigrant worker rights and opportunities. He designed training programs that helped qualified immigrants navigate professional licensing requirements, created mentorship networks that connected immigrant workers with advancement opportunities, and established advocacy services that protected workers from discrimination and exploitation. The Foundation's programs achieved remarkable success in their first year of operation, helping over 2,000 immigrant workers gain access to jobs that matched their qualifications and potential. Hassan's personal story served as inspiration for program participants, demonstrating that recognition and opportunity were possible even for people who had been systematically undervalued by institutional prejudice. Hassan's children thrived in their new circumstances, with his eldest daughter Omara earning early admission to engineering programs at prestigious universities. His son Omar excelled in advanced mathematics courses, while his youngest daughter Zahra showed exceptional talent in languages and cultural studies. The family's transformation from working poverty to middle-class stability demonstrated the potential that had been locked away by discriminatory employment practices. Farah's return to professional nursing allowed her to contribute her medical expertise to community health programs serving immigrant populations. Her cultural competency and linguistic abilities made her invaluable in providing healthcare services to people who had previously faced barriers similar to those her family had experienced. The Sheikh's health recovery was complete, but his spiritual and moral recovery continued to evolve as he worked closely with Hassan on foundation programs and policy advocacy. Their friendship, built on mutual respect and shared commitment to social justice, transcended the cultural and economic differences that had initially separated them. Hassan has become the teacher I never knew I needed, the Sheikh reflected during a private conversation with his personal physician. He has shown me that wisdom and moral courage are not privileges of the wealthy or educated, but gifts that can emerge from any background when people maintain their connection to basic human values. The broader social impact of Hassan's heroism continued to expand as his story inspired similar acts of moral courage and cross-cultural understanding throughout the community. Other immigrant workers found the confidence to report discrimination and demand fair treatment, while employers became more conscious of the talent and potential they might be overlooking due to prejudicial assumptions about foreign-born employees. Judge Ramirez's final report on the Grand Meridian case became a landmark document in employment law, establishing new precedents for prosecuting systematic discrimination and providing comprehensive remedies for affected workers. The case was cited in dozens of subsequent discrimination lawsuits, creating a legal framework that made it more difficult for employers to maintain segregated and discriminatory workplace cultures. The transformation of the Grand Meridian Hotel itself became a model for institutional change and cultural competency development. Under new management and federal oversight, the hotel implemented revolutionary policies that recognized and utilized the diverse talents of its immigrant workforce. Former janitors and housekeepers were promoted to management positions based on their qualifications and abilities, creating a more inclusive and effective organizational culture. Hassan's story also inspired changes in immigration policy discussions and cultural integration programs. His example demonstrated the economic and social benefits of recognizing immigrant talents and providing pathways for professional advancement, regardless of national origin or previous employment status. As the second year of the Nazir Foundation's operation began, Hassan reflected on the unexpected journey that had transformed his life and the lives of thousands of other immigrant workers. What had started as a simple act of human compassion during a medical emergency had evolved into a comprehensive movement for social justice and cultural understanding. The Sheikh's transformation from wealthy oil magnate to social justice advocate continued to inspire other wealthy individuals to examine their own values and responsibilities. Several billionaires established similar foundations focused on immigrant rights and cultural competency, creating a network of resources and advocacy that extended Hassan's impact far beyond what any single person could achieve. Hassan's heroism had indeed silenced everyone in that hotel ballroom, but not through words or arguments. He had demonstrated through action that true leadership and moral courage could emerge from unexpected sources, and that the content of a person's character mattered far more than their economic status or social position. The story of the Sheikh and the janitor became a powerful symbol of the potential for positive change when people are willing to see past surface differences and respond to shared humanity. Hassan's simple act of helping someone in need had created ripple effects that continued to transform lives, institutions, and social attitudes years after that dramatic night at the Grand Meridian Hotel. The legacy of that evening would endure as a reminder that heroism often comes from the most unexpected places, and that the most profound changes in society can begin with one person's willingness to act with courage and compassion when others remain silent and still. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.